Welcome, listeners. This is what you've been waiting for all week, I know. I have Carrie Hopkins-Doubts back here with me. She's a spiritual resilience coach, and she was nice enough to come back this week because we had the greatest conversation. And I'm so thankful, Carrie, to have you back here. And listeners, if you want to hear Carrie's story, just go back and listen because as I said, I love it when people go through something really difficult and hard, and they do something about it and they help other people with it. And that's exactly what Carrie's doing in her work. So we started last week and we started talking about the 9 steps to rebuilding life after loss. It can be the loss of a loved one. It can be a divorce. It can be the loss of a big change in your life. It doesn't necessarily have to be a death. But I was going to try to restate the first 3 foundational steps. But Carrie, welcome back. Do you want to just really briefly do an overview and then we'll jump right into the 6 that follow?
Sure. We talked about this in the last week's session, and my 9 step program for rebuilding your life after loss starts with the very first step of creating a safety net. Or if you're hurting, if you're needing support, if you can't get out of bed, you want to create a safety net for you to feel and to name and express your feelings. So that's that first step. And
Perfect.
then the second one, we talked about creating capacity through radical self care. It's often when you're going through a big loss and you're perhaps having to support other people at the same time who are going through the same loss, you may have put your own self care on the back burner. Going through grief is just going to affect you on the physical level, and so it's really important for you to take good care of yourself, not only in the physical, but the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual level. So that's where we dive into that and create a health and wellness plan for you to implement and to stick to. And then the third thing we talked about was making peace with the past. A lot of times we find ourselves wanting to move on from a loss. And unfortunately, we don't move on, we move forward, carrying what we've experienced with us. And it really helps if we are not carrying baggage with us. We're not repeating patterns from the past that are not good for us. So we really examine that. And this is where we start to bring in that idea of forgiveness, of letting things really go that are in your way, blocking you from feeling peaceful about your decisions, what you did do, what you didn't do, etc., about what happened. So that's where we really make peace with the past. So you're able to start moving forward then. So that brings us to step 4.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
So now that we've cleared and set a foundation for ourselves emotionally, we can start to design the vision for the life that you want to create on the other side of this big change. And this is where, a lot of times when people are in the midst or they're really close into the loss, if you were to ask them, well, what kind of life do you want to create for yourself after this? A lot of times, I don't know. I don't know. I just need to get through this. But this, as being the fourth step, we've had some time and people start to think about, well, what is it that I want to be experiencing, in my future? And this is where we really we bring in visioning tools to help people really dream big, really create a life that they love on the other side of that divorce. So what we do next is in step 5, I call that creating your future. Because now that we have the vision or the blueprint from step 4, we start taking action. So we start putting new plans in motion. We take those visions, we take those goals, we turn them into realistic, manageable action steps. This is where I introduce what I call the baby steps. Sometimes when we feel overwhelmed and we feel like we're not able to take these major steps, we can take the little baby steps that are so important, because once you get that momentum of taking action, then more action is a result of that.
I love how you said that, and I still believe in that with a breathing technique. I started a new breathing technique, and it's in a past podcast. I tell you how I do it, but I only do it 5 minutes at night and 5 minutes in the morning, and it's actually affecting my sleep positively and
Mhm,
my stress level, and that's just a tiny little thing, and it makes it easier, and you can feel good about. I've never really been able to meditate or
mhm,
do breath work, but when I took it as little 5-minute increments, so I think
mhm,
that's what you're saying.
mhm.
Now, Carrie, you know how I jump in with questions. So I have to go
Right.
to step number 4. When you're talking about designing your vision,
Mhm,
I know when people are really in a tough spot, whatever it is, it's you kind of wallow in it for a while,
mm,
or it's hard to envision, like, I even think if you lose the love of your life, at what point can you envision it? And how long can people expect to have to sit in kind of the sadness and
mm,
learning how to come to peace with the past?
mhm. Well, you're raising a really excellent point because just because we've explored a step and people have taken action on those steps, it doesn't mean you're not gonna be revisiting them. Because life comes and we have a new grief trigger, a new situation or circumstance that kind of puts you back into, oh, well, I need to spend some time really feeling my feelings again. So we
Mhm.
need to honor the very fluid aspects of grief. It's not a linear process where, hey, I'm done with that, on to the
Right.
next. And so you're raising such a great point. And the other great point that you raised was we don't just sit down and go, we
Yeah.
do this very intentionally. So we start with the power of intention. So we help people, well, what is an intention that you might like to set for your life, on the other side of this divorce, on the other side of this big loss? And so a power of intention could be helping a person come up with their intention because once we set the intention, it works as a magnet in a way
Mhm.
to start bringing forward for you the experiences and the learning that you need. And so it's like when you're clear on in your intention, you may not know how, but it starts to show up on how you're going to implement that intention.
Okay.
So
I totally get that. It's something that I did that I called future self work. Like,
correct.
what did you see? And then you kind of make your way there. But the question that I have is like, is it possible it might take you a couple of years after a big loss to actually be able to envision? And so, for those poor people, I don't want to, it's painful
Mm,
and I don't want to see suffering, right? Right. We don't want
yeah.
the suffering, but we're going to feel the pain.
Mhm. But you're absolutely right because we're gonna go in and out of that process, and that's the beauty of, when I take somebody through this, I'm right there with you, so I know when you're ready to
Yeah.
move to the next thing.
Okay.
A lot of what we do also in this segment is clarifying your core values. What's really important? What's always been important to you? And what will continue
Mhm.
to be important to you? So we're creating from this alignment with what's important to you. If it's family, it may be creating a life where you're close by family. So the clarity starts to come in through the exercises we do, and it's also a baby step towards having a full-blown vision. And here's the thing, we may create a vision, we don't know how to get there,
Mhm.
right? But that's the power of intention. Once we
Mhm.
set the intention, it's like the ways to move forward just start materializing. That's really interesting. I haven't seen anybody really get stuck here and just say, I can't create my vision for my future. We
Okay.
start small. If you think about a baby step, right? So we're going to take a baby step here. To a baby, when they take their very first step, when they sit up, when they do a milestone, a baby step, it's a milestone. It's like it changes their life. When they're able to sit up by
Right.
themselves, they're able to do things that they couldn't do when they could just be on their tummy, right? So even if it's a baby step, it's a milestone.
Mhm.
So these are important steps. Like your example there, a small step taken 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes in the
Yeah.
evening can create a huge change for you.
Yep, and I even get it now where you could do it rather early and say, "I just wanna be able to feel good enough to get out for a
Right.
little walk
Yeah.
next
Yeah.
week." Yeah,
Right.
okay, I get it, I get it. Thank you very much for clarifying that. Okay, so
Sure.
now we're on number 6, I think.
Mhm. So we've aligned with our goals. We've done our brainstorming and planning in step 5. We've also, looked at the power of accountability, having an accountability buddy, somebody to partner with going, how's it going on taking action on your steps. And then module 7, the seventh step I call it exploring purpose and meaning. And, it's really important at this stage to understand that what happens for a lot of people is they come up with this idea that they no longer have purpose. If you're a mom and you lost
Mhm.
your son, you know, well, that was my purpose so it's like we really look at you may have a new purpose or a different purpose or a slightly different sort of shift on the way you see your purpose, but you have purpose. So it's like we really help people get in touch with their purpose now and really start looking at those internal and spiritual adjustments that they need to make about their own self identity. Who am I? Why am I here? What is the contribution I'm here to make in the world? And we help people create a life purpose statement. And this becomes their true north. This is why I'm here. And it's not, people get a little tweaked around purpose, like it's this big, grand thing. It is very often a very simple thing about your way of being in the world.
What is my purpose? How do you pinpoint that?
Yeah. It can be as simple as people really getting in touch with a very deep purpose of my purpose is to be loving, is to be in my loving no matter what. Or my purpose is to just be a safe space for people. I'm just throwing out some examples
Mhm.
for you. It's not like my purpose is to become, the best violin player on the world.
Right.
It's not even so much a doing purpose, it is who are you being while you're doing.
Okay, because when you said that, loving hits me.
Mhm,
That's a loving my grandchildren, my children, my husband, my friends, people, just people.
mhm,
And
mhm,
then what popped in was a doing,
mhm,
was a sharing what I learned.
mhm. You're right on the money because I really look at there's, the soul energy and then there's the doing energy, the ego, right? And we talk about if your purpose is to be loving and you're infusing that soul essence of loving into whatever it is you're doing, you're fulfilling your purpose. That can be an intention. And sometimes we don't quite be as loving as we'd like to be,
Right.
when we're activated or upset or hurt. But if that's our intention and that's our purpose, we just keep coming back to it. It's
Okay.
like if we're headed somewhere and we get a little off course, we know where we're headed still, right?
Okay. And I have a question. So because I really didn't put that much thought into that, is that probably the correct purpose in my life?
I don't think there's a correct. I think that there's no right or wrong answer to this. There's the answer that is best for you. But often it boils down to something very similar. If we as a soul having a human experience and our soul is here to help us learn to be more loving while we're having that human experience, it can kind of boil down to if you choose loving as your purpose, you're in pretty good territory.
Okay. Well, I just know I love loving and it just
Yeah,
happens.
that's right. Yeah. So that could be your purpose. and how you share that in the world, like your podcast, loving
Mhm.
on your people, who are
Mhm.
listening. For me, that's a big part of my purpose. And I wish I could remember all the details of mine, but mine is really to create a safe space for people to adjust to these kinds of losses and create a
Mhm.
life they love on the other side of it. So that's the doing part of it. But it's also while I'm doing, I am being with people in my very best, loving, present
Mhm.
self.
I
Yeah.
love that. It's much simpler than I was making it when you
Mm,
first brought it up. So
mhm.
thank you for clarifying. Okay,
There's
so
a lot here, definitely.
oh yes, there is. Feel like you could talk about each one for a half an hour.
Yeah. Well, and doing each of these steps, it is, a period of time where we really focus in on this and give everybody the time that they need for sure. Number 8, I call this reframing the relationship. So often if there's a death, we still have a relationship with the person who has died because that's inside of us. This is where we really take a look at what we call the reframe, how we're going to look at the relationship and how not only are we looking at it from a lens of the past, but the nowness of it. What's the quality of this relationship that you want to nurture inside you? Because, in most grief counseling programs, we don't talk about, well, you've just got to forget that person and move on. No, that person has been a part of your life and continues to be part of your life because that relationship, like I said, it lives inside of you, even though they're not physically present with you.
Okay, I have another question.
Yes.
Could it be your relationship with yourself that you're reframing? Because that's how I see like you've been through something difficult, like a health journey,
Hmm.
and you're different
Yeah.
because of it. And maybe it was scary. And
Hmm.
so now you reframe the relationship you have with yourself in the present
Hmm.
and you can, okay, all right, I like that.
If you think about reframing it, it's like we're talking about like photography, kind of like. So, say you see a picture and you're looking at this particular part of the picture. If you move the frame to a different part of the picture, you're going to see something different. So, this is what I help people do is just like the reframing is kind of just a process of where are we looking? What are we focusing on? And this is particularly helpful when people are going through a divorce because often the spouse is still, part of the picture, especially if
Mhm.
there are children for co-parenting. So we definitely want to help the two or the one person I'm working with reframe the relationship and move away from they're bad and wrong and they hurt me and da 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 da, but reframe it in such a way that there's a path towards being able to have a cordial working relationship with this person.
Okay.
So
Yes.
that's very practical in terms of when people go through a divorce.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Totally understand that.
And then let's see, our ninth step.
Yeah, I think we're on
I
that's
might
the
have got
final
I might have gotten the steps mixed up in terms of which one is which. 6 is exploring purpose and meaning. 7 is reframing the relationship. 8 is embracing your strengths. So this is where we get to look back on the last 7 steps, and you will find that you have discovered strengths you didn't know you had. You didn't know that you knew how to do certain things. Well, what happens? You get stronger. And so this is the step where we look back and go, here are all the ways that I've grown
Mhm,
stronger.
I
And
love
really
that.
naming and embracing that, it brings it right in where you go, yeah, this has changed me in many ways for the better.
Love it.
And then our last step is anchoring the learning by giving back. It's service. So people who have really adapted to and adjusted to this kind of loss and are in the process or have rebuilt their life after loss, Typically, what happens is it just opens up this area of compassion and wanting to help people or in perhaps maybe a similar situation to themselves, or just to give back in service in some way. Because it's our natural inclination when our heart is open, when we've been through something major and we see other people struggling. We want to give, we want to support, we want to be of service. So we talk about the ways that you can, once you're grounded in this new life, you want to give back to your community or to your family, to the world in this open hearted way that you have cultivated with yourself. So it's really a beautiful way to wrap, how satisfying it can feel to serve someone.
Amen. And when you're saying this, Carrie, it is exactly what you're doing.
Mm,
You are. You've gone through this, you've healed, and now you're helping other people.
yeah. Yeah.
And so I so appreciate that. And I love chatting with you. I feel like I have a new friend. Time flew by again. Carrie, I do want to probably have you back again. Let's stay in touch because, and listeners, if there's anything that you want Carrie to delve into more, please let me know. And Carrie, once again, we'll have all your information in the show notes, but how do people find you?
So it's Carrie Hopkins-Doubts. You can find me at my company's website. It's Life's Next Chapter Coaching. And yeah, if you want to have a conversation, reach out. I'm happy to support. And let me know you found me on Lisa's show.
Wonderful. So listeners do that. Carrie's awesome. I feel like I want to reach out and talk to her too on a personal level. I appreciate you being here, Carrie, and we will connect again because you are a new person in my life that I love to chat with.
Likewise. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you to all your listeners.